By the end of 2023, life was but a dream for the Red Bull F1 team. They had dominated the season, winning 21 out of 22 races. They were the Constructors' champions and had also won the Drivers' Championship as well. The best designer in the paddock, Adrian Newey, had designed an absolute beast with the RB19, which in turn was driven by the best driver on the grid at the time in Max Verstappen, and all directives in the team were being spearheaded by Christian Horner, who in under a couple of decades had taken Red Bull from being a phoenix rising from Ford's self-inflicted pile of horse manure to being one of the most successful F1 teams of all time. It really was the best of times for the people at Milton Keynes. However, in the time between then and now, a lot of things have, taken a turn, shall we say. Adrian Newey left of his own accord to go to Aston Martin. Christian Horner had been ousted after months and months of speculation regarding his place in the team after an episode befitting of anybody in a position of power. And there have been talks that Verstappen is to flee the ship to the mortal enemy, perhaps sooner rather than later. These things, along with a myriad of other personnel changes over the years, impending regulation changes that might derail them, and skepticism over whether they can identify their shortcomings, never mind solve them, means that this once indomitable empire appears to be crashing and burning into the ground. It seems that, at the moment at least, Red Bull are falling apart. That dream of theirs has now descended into a nightmare. Does that sound like a stretch? Well, maybe not. As they say, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. And right now, it appears that things at Milton Keynes, things are starting to come full circle. Back in 2004, yeah, I know, more history stuff, the Ford Motor Company were looking to offload a big share of their Jaguar Formula 1 team that they had, as they grew impatient with them not being the world champions yet. They found a new bedfellow with Dietrich Mateschitz, the owner of the Red Bull company, who agreed to a 50-50 deal with Ford for part ownership of the team. Everything was set in stone. Everything was ready to go. But then the head honchos at Ford, in their infinite wisdom, decided, nah, we're just gonna get rid of the whole thing. They then offered Mateschitz the chance to buy the team as a whole, to which he replied, no. After some reluctance and some coaxing, he eventually agreed to purchase the team at the 11th hour, and thus things started to get underway. Still with Jaguar paint all over the shop, Red Bull personnel arrived at their new digs and Milton Keynes to assess what the hell was going on, and immediately thought, what the hell were these guys doing over the last few years? It was clear a lot of work had to be done in terms of direction, morale, and motivation around this place, and they had no confidence that they would get that with the current leadership in place. So they fired those guys, with their morning coffee still simmering on the office table, and brought in the showrunner of the ardent Formula 3000 team, Christian Horner. It was a tentative first few years, but he did have a clear direction that he wanted to go in, and he kept on board everybody who wanted the same thing that he did, and that was to become the world champions. Anyone there simply to collect a paycheck and punch out at 5 was told to vamoose. He also spearheaded the coup of legendary designer Adrian Newey from McLaren, convincing Mateschitz that the astronomical salary that he was demanding was totally worth it. Then again, it didn't exactly take a rocket scientist to realize that hiring Newey as your chief technical officer is the same as having Surfshark VPN be your safeguard and your cyber companion. In the same way that every F1 team needs an Adrian Newey in their garage, every Donnie in the land needs proper security for their cyber belongings. From the minor, trivial stuff, such as keeping in touch with your family, to the slightly more important stuff, such as online banking, keeping that sensitive information of yours safe is of the utmost importance. Who do I recommend? Don't you know it? Surfshark is a VPN service that protects your information by encrypting all the data that you send through the internet, thereby concealing yourself from all known forms of monastery. But this ain't a one-trick pony. You guys want more, don't you? Well, we all know the struggles of wanting to watch some cinematic masterpiece that we spontaneously remembered one day, only to search it up on streaming services and, oh great, it's not here. In this country anyway. But thanks to Surfshark, you can change your location, at least virtually, and break free from the shackles of geo-enabling. It ain't quite teleportation, but it is about as close as we're gonna get right now. So, secure your privacy with Surfshark. Click the link in the description box below, or use code JOSHREVEL at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Attaining the highest level of security in the land will only come at a cost to you of about a couple of bucks a month, rather than tens of millions. Plus, you're gonna get those 4 free months and a 30-day money-back guarantee as well. So what the bloody hell are you waiting for?
Okay, back to the show.
Newey did not take all that long to make an impact. By 2009, the team was beginning to make some big strides. By 2010, it was the best qualifying car on the grid, and by 2011, it was the best at, well, everything. A run of 4 consecutive Constructors and Drivers' Championships made this the team to beat. After years of meddling and midfield purgatory, here they were in the promised land. In no small part thanks to the pencil of Newey and especially the leadership of Horner. And yeah, having Sebastian Vettel there as a driver did kind of help too. Thereafter, they did hit a bit of a lull. Mercedes were light years ahead of the pack, while Renault were being obtusely French. Despite effectively being a works team for them, Renault were not investing anywhere near enough time to help Red Bull bridge the gap, saying that any deficits could be made up for with willpower and by willpower. Horner disagreed, quite harshly and very publicly. The hostilities shown damaged their relationship beyond repair, and all the while, star driver Daniel Ricciardo had fled to the works Renault team and knew he was becoming disillusioned with Formula 1, wanting to run away and design floating skate parks instead. Horner was starting to lose control of the whole situation, but evidently he convinced Newey to stay, and for 2019 onwards, they would bring in Honda for their power units. There was plenty of skepticism given how disastrous their stint at McLaren had gone, but pretty soon it proved to be a match made in heaven. McLaren's problem was a lack of willingness to accommodate. Red Bull, though, were all open arms, but that was only one piece to the puzzle. Part of Ricciardo's departure was down to the presence of one Maximilian Verstappen. He entered Formula 1 in 2015 after only 1 year of junior Formula racing. It was soon clear though that 1 year was all that he would need. His time in that Toro Rosso was so spellbinding that he was almost nabbing podiums in a car that would have been lucky to score points. He was performing spectacular moves and oozed star potential to a degree that it was undeniable, inescapable, enough to have an immediate promotion to the big Red Bull team? Well, they thought so. He would be brought into the team a few rounds into 2016 as Daniel Kvyat was sent to the Gulag. It was an immediate success, with Max winning his first race with the team, although he did go through a rough patch where he punted anything that moved and slammed into anything that didn't. But by 2020, he started to hit his stride, and then in 2021, he put in some monumental drives to help propel him to his first ever World Drivers' Championship. It was a hard-fought slog to that vase with 1 or 2 controversial moments along the way, but anyone who thought that this was just a one-off desperado effort that would curtail their campaign in the years to come were completely wrong. In 2022, the RB18 proved to be a weapon that only got stronger as Ferrari fell victim to its own Italianness. With the Constructors and Drivers' Championships won that year, life was but a dream for this outfit. Now, why did I just mention all of what I just did? This whole brush over the history of the Red Bull outfit up to this point? Because it needs to be said how much this team accomplished in such a short time frame, and who exactly was behind it. It wasn't just one thing. The leadership of Horner was a big part, as was Newey's genius, Max's driving prowess too, and the combined effort of everybody working at that outfit and Milton Keynes. But it also needs to be said that Mateschitz was the Papa Smurf of the organization, the man that everybody could go to for advice and reason. Whenever there was a quarrel going on, a rift between drivers or whoever, Dietrich was always there to calm the waters. This was a team, and no one person is bigger than the team in sports. You need a cohesive effort going on with everybody working for each other if you want things to succeed. And it was around this time where the first cracks started to appear. Dan Fellows had been a mainstay at the Red Bull team even since before they had even become Red Bull at all, way back in the Ford days. Since 2006, he served as an aerodynamicist for the team and was influential even into the ground effects era in 2022. But by this time, he had elected to leave the team for Aston Martin, siding with the green in more ways than one. It appeared that this was a great buy for the team when they rocked up to 2023 with a car that Fernando Alonso could finally actually fight with. It appeared that Red Bull had lost a decent fish with Fellows. Nevertheless, things were tracking along nicely for Red Bull still. That year, in fact, the car was so dominant that it was a minor miracle that they even lost one at all. When they turned up to the 2024 season with the RB20, things again were looking fine and dandy. But this was also the year when things started to take a really, really wrong turn. On February the 5th, reports started to emerge of Horner being investigated for inappropriate behaviors from within the company. Any hopes that this would be resolved quietly were extinguished once the news broke to the public. The upshot is that, despite multiple statements filled with soft rhetoric and easy words and fluffy pillows, the outcry from a large portion of the fanbase was beginning to become a major problem for the team. Not least because it was placing Horner's position into jeopardy, but because sponsors and partners of the team were understandably starting to develop an itch. The Ford Motor Company, who were about to get back brackets a bet with these guys, mind you, demanded answers from Red Bull about these misgivings, and lamented the lack of transparency at hand. Now, yes, legal malarkey make it imperative to play cards close to the chest in the interim, but with all the hullabaloo around this whole ordeal, the longer this information was held, the more damning the whole thing was becoming. At some point, a non-answer becomes an answer. 23 days after the first reports came out, however, Red Bull announced that the case would be dismissed. So that seemed to be that. But then just one day later, an anonymous source sent an email to F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali, every other F1 team principal down the paddock, members of the press, and this dickhead, with the subject title of the email being Christian Horner Investigation Evidence. It contained a bunch of WhatsApp messages reportedly between Horner and his accuser. At the time, no one knew for sure whether these messages were authentic or not, and Horner himself categorically refuted the allegations. But the commotion was beginning to make his position untenable, and things were about to get worse. Meetings between the powers that be were taking place to discuss what the hell was going on and what they were going to do about it. But the more crucial meetings taking place were between Red Bull, Horner, and Max Verstappen's manager, Raymond Vermeulen. His father Jos, himself known to be a valiant crusader for the well-being of others, went so far as to say in no uncertain terms that Horner could no longer be entrusted with the role of team principal. On March 7th, the accuser would be suspended from Red Bull with full pay, although that was a big yikes moment. Then, a day later, Dr. Helmut Marko laid down the suggestion that he too may be suspended from the team at some point, something to do with leaks pertaining to the Horner case. Marko may be an unsavory clump of Play-Doh, but this is the one time you wouldn't mind going into bat for the guy. Verstappen thought so too, leaping to the defense of Marko at the Austrian Grand Prix, saying that if Marko goes, so might he. Evidently, he would not be suspended, and Max would stay on the team. For now. March 16th, there were reports that suggested that a complaint had been made against the sport's governing body, the FIA. Every couple of days, it just seemed that the waters were getting murkier, and it was starting to impact morale in the team. In the book Growing Wings, the inside story of Red Bull, author Ben Hunt talked about the day that the WhatsApp messages were leaked. He spoke of a tense mood within the Red Bull hospitality unit, saying that there was a nervousness, a strange uneasiness, and a sense that something was about to happen. The thing is, that was before the messages were leaked, and suggested that people in the garage knew more than what they were letting on. And then the first big domino fell. By late April, it was being reported that designing god Adrian Newey, the man responsible for some of the most dominant cars that Formula 1 had ever seen, would be leaving Red Bull in 2024 for Aston Martin. It wouldn't be officially announced until September, but it was the worst kept secret in the entire paddock. Red Bull had just lost a major asset, and reports were that his departure was heavily linked to the saga surrounding Horner. That same month, the head of strategy, Will Courtney, that guy would be leaving for McLaren. And just the previous August, another major name would leave the team in the form of Jonathan Wheatley, the sporting director of the team, who would move into the role of team principal at Sauber. Oh yeah, someone I forgot to mention earlier was the chief engineering officer, Rob Marshall, who would leave his post in 2023 to head over to McLaren. And virtually since his arrival at Bruce's domain, that team has been on a huge wave of form, while Red Bull started their descent. Coinky-dink? Keep on telling yourself that. While all this was going on, the competitiveness of Red Bull was in freefall. It went from being a team fielding an unbeatable car last year to now struggling to score points, if not at the hands of Max Verstappen, who himself was being wooed by Toto Wolff over at Mercedes, who was desperate to find his new boo after Sir Lewis Hamilton had caved into the allure of the prancing horse. People were leaving the team left, right, and center. The car was getting slower, and all the while Jos was in Horner's ear, screaming, "You are tearing us apart, Horner!" This dream of theirs was descending into a nightmare. For a while, the noise started to die down as Max secured his fourth Drivers' Championship. Attention then shifted to the 2025 season, and for a lot of people, the quarrels of last year had been largely forgotten. But not by everybody. Verstappen's management was still out for blood against Horner, and the RB21 could not hope to match the car that McLaren were fielding that year. There is an exit clause in Max's contract should he be in an uncompetitive position in the driver's standings by a certain stage of the year, and by the midway point things were getting mighty close, and suggestions even that he might not even wait for that. Toto Wolff's persistence was starting to pay off, with Verstappen thinking real hard about a move to Brackley, and the Mercedes board prepared to break the bank and sell all their children to get him on board. The state of Red Bull this time was a far cry from what it was just a year ago, with only Max able to get a result, hell, the only one to get points out of this thing. The fact that he was able to win and get pole positions with this car prove unequivocally that they just cannot afford to lose him. A lot have made mention about how the car is built around Max, Now, even if that was the case, he constantly bitches and moans about the handling of the car, and we've seen on multiple occasions that it handles like a drunk. So if they really are building the car around Max, they're clueless. And if they're not, then this is just what the new generation are gonna have to put up with. And I don't know what's the more disconcerting scenario there. And a lot of it can be traced back to the captain of the ship. And it was something that the Red Bull board were not prepared to see him slam into an iceberg. But with Horner having been around since day one, there was just no way they were gonna dump him like some morose piece of garbage, right? Right? On July 9th, the unthinkable happened. Christian Horner was fired from Red Bull. The 20-year reign as the captain was over. A couple other bigwigs in the team with close ties to him would also be given their walking papers at the same time. Some have suggested that his firing was a result of Verstappen having secretly signed for Mercedes and it being the last straw for a total restructuring. Now, is that true? Well, don't bet your life on that. It's now pretty much known that Mercedes will retain their driver lineup of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli into 2026. Thus, all them highly publicized talks have come to naught, and Max will race on with Red Bull into 2026, albeit with an appetite for a better seat elsewhere on the grid, should there be one. But that was a lot of effort for Toto to go through for no result. What exactly was his play here? To pester Max over his contract so as to apply pressure to Red Bull so they would end up firing Christian Horner? Nah, correlation don't necessarily equal causation. We've been down this road before. Racing Bulls team principal Laurent Mackies would take his place, and truthfully, he's got a lot of work ahead of him because the damage has already been done. A lot could be blamed on Horner, but he was undeniably a massive part in why the team got to where it is. The fact that it was all obliterated within the space of a year is inconceivable. But, you know, there are consequences to your actions, but something else that very much did play a role in Red Bull's decline was the passing of Dietrich Mateschitz in 2022. Dietrich was a guy that people could go talk to, bury the hatchet, attain advice. He was the Papa Smurf of the company. In a way, it felt similar to stuff that I myself experienced in my own family. Once the one central figure in the family who everybody latched onto for advice passes away, it kind of feels like it takes all direction out of the family. No longer are we quite as connected as we once were. It may not be exactly alike, but it did feel like after Dietrich left us, problems started to occur for the team at Milton Keynes. And now the team is being directed by the board as they head into an era where Ford is going to be a big player once again. And by the way, an F1 team having its big decisions dictated by the board was the exact reason why the Jaguar Formula 1 team folded back in 2004 and ended up being sold to Red Bull. The board in question? That of the Ford Motor Company. You wondered how things were coming full circle here? Ladies and germs, I may not be a smart man, I may not be a wise man, but I do assume things, and that therefore makes me a man. Marco's influence remains, and depending upon who you talk to, that's either disastrous or catastrophic. The team's star driver is looking for a way out, the morale of the team is at a low, and Red Bull will still have to pay out the arse for the remainder of Horner's contract. Come to think of it, Red Bull currently have a bad habit of paying people not to compete for them. There doesn't appear to be any clue as to how to make the car easier to drive for the next generation coming in, and if the results don't improve out of these moves, sponsors and partners could end up leaving, commercial viability of the team plummets, and questions about its future will surface once again. I think, at this point, it is fair to say that Red Bull are falling apart. But just like back in their troubled times in the past, they are more than capable of digging themselves out of the rut and return to the top step of the rostrum once again. They've got all the resources they need. What they require is unshakable leadership. And maybe in the embers of Horner's self-imposed burnings, Mackies can lead the team into a new era. Just be sure to keep him away from any and all Coldplay concerts.